it's doing what you say that you're going to do, right? And it's sort of, and I've heard it said before by other people, one being Ed Milet, like keeping those promises that you make to yourself. I think that's a strong way to have a benchmark for success, not just day by day, but hour by hour and minute by minute.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mindset Podcast, hosted by Eric Nelson and brought to you by Wild Oak Capital. Eric is a real estate investor, business owner, and performance coach. Throughout this series, Eric explores the mindset behind why certain investors are so successful and how we can learn from their achievements and failures. Eric asks the tough questions around the habits, discipline, mindset, and more required to achieve the most ambitious goals. Thank you for being here and enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Real Estate Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Eric Nelson, and I'm very excited for the guests today, Daisy and Luke from Make It Rain podcast. I'll probably butcher you guys' last names, so if you could give us your intro, and then we'll just start from the very beginning. Where you're from, what you've been doing, and then kind of what led you to real estate.
Yeah, so my name is Luc Debreau. My full name is Jean-Luc Henri Debreau, so I have a very, very French name. The reason for that is that my dad, he's from Trinidad. And so my name is very popular down there, and that's part of it. But yeah, long story short, ended up getting really involved in multifamily real estate about 3 years ago. And then last year started a podcast after having invested passively a little bit over 3 years ago. And we started the podcast, like I mentioned. My business partner and wife, Daisy Serrano, we end up working together hand in hand. And now we're in Texas working on actively syndicating and joint venturing on large multifamily deals. So I know it's a very, very quick synopsis, but I'll hand it off to Daisy. So
yeah, I like the hand in hand. I caught that. This is Daisy Serrano, husband and wife team. And my background is a little bit different. It's actually not in real estate at all. I studied criminology for my undergrad and then did my master's in education and higher education specifically. So I was working in international education for about 10 years within that space, doing counseling, managing huge scholarships for international countries. So I did that for quite a bit. And now, as of a month ago, quit my W-2 job and am now doing multifamily full time. So with that
awesome.
comes...
Congrats. Yeah.
Thank you. With that comes, the podcast, looking for acquisitions. We're now in Texas. We just moved. We're originally from California. And as of a couple months ago, we're now in Austin full time. So with that, it's really just focusing down on, acquiring property out here. We've been investing passively for the last 4 years. We've invested in about 452 units here in San Antonio, Texas, and now are transitioning onto the GP side. So as a lead sponsor. So Luke continues working his W-2 job, and now I am focused 100% on multifamily and working to, make our dreams come true and provide more for our family.
Awesome. So Luke, what is your W-2 job now? And is it hard to balance those two things?
Yeah, so my W-2 job now, it's within the construction industry. And my background is educationally is similar to yours, Eric, structural engineering. And so I've worked in some form or fashion in the construction industry for the past 10 years. And now it's really a construction tech, fintech startup that I work at. It's great. I mean, if I have to have a W-2, it's really awesome to end up working there at this company here in Austin. But I would say, to answer your question about balancing it, there's some difficulty with it, of course, because there's only so many hours in a day. And, it's not just work daytime and then real estate at night. It's like, well, I have my friends, I have my family, I have my wife, I have my health, right? I need to actually have leisure time as well. So it's like, it can be difficult, but I just end up waking up early. I do, a couple hours, usually an hour and a half in the morning, and we'll do a couple hours in the evening. And then, like this morning, I was up and it was 8 a.m. and I was working. And so it's just making the time at the end of the day. It can be difficult, but it's just part of the deal with wanting to, with the goals that we have and what we want to achieve together here.
Yeah, and just to help our listeners understand, today's Saturday, so 8 a.m. would normally be normal, but they got up, I got up at 8. It's like, yeah, that's normal. But on a Saturday, that's something big. And I experienced the same thing. My day job I really enjoy, but it's absolutely balanced. I mean, trying to do real estate early morning, late evenings, that type of thing as well. So you guys mentioned that you moved. Help us understand the reason for the move, and then I'll have a few more follow-up questions for that. But was the reason for the move specifically to be in your market, or was there other reasons that you wanted to get out of California?
It was a combination, but really the main reason was to be in the market. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we've been investing in Texas almost 4 years now. And so we're very bullish on the state and specifically the area where we're in. And so we wanted to be boots on the ground. We wanted to be able to get out and tour properties and meet brokers and really establish ourselves here in the market that we're investing in and now acquiring property in as well. And so that was really the number one reason to come out here. The second reason also is, we got married in October of last year. We're now in March. And so with that, looking to start having children in the next few years and wanted a change of quality for our personal life as well. And with the cost of living in Texas compared to California, it's completely different, right? So that's really given us the opportunity for me to transition out of my W-2 and focus on real estate full time, to be able to build our portfolio and get that passive income flowing even more. So then when we do have children, I'm able to do both, right? Still do multifamily and still be within real estate, but also be able to be with our children and not have to go back to a 9 to 5.
Yeah, that's awesome. My wife's from California as well, and we travel out there. And yeah, cost of living is just, it's so difficult, right? And, we live in Colorado, so our kind of similar story where we wanted to raise kids in a little bit smaller town and kind of do that thing. We've really enjoyed being here. Very similar story though. The market here is very hard to cash flow. So everything we do, we look out of state. So I won't be moving, I don't think, but kind of looking at similar markets where it makes some sense. Never say never, right? I don't get to make that. Cool. So you guys also mentioned that you had invested passively in some deals. Can you kind of explain your experience there, and did you enjoy doing that?
Yeah, definitely. So we invested passively in 2 deals, and this was a few years ago, like Daisy had mentioned. And one's about 200 units, the other one's about 250, and they're both in San Antonio. And we did quite a bit of due diligence on them before we ended up going in and wiring the money. But, a big thing for us was being able to grow our wealth, right, in an investment vehicle that we actually understand, and with operators that we felt would end up doing right by their investors and doing right by us as well. And so that's why we, ended up going in on these deals. And it was a good way. I would say I don't know, I'd be interested to hear Daisy's thoughts, but I'd say for me personally, it was a good way to kind of get started and break ground within the industry, because, if you end up advocating for yourself as a passive investor, as a limited partner, you are able to end up getting a good amount of access. Of course, you need to balance that, right? Their job isn't to answer every single little question that you have, right? But their job is to be a good steward of your money. And do the best thing for the investors. But you're able to learn quite a bit if you end up advocating for yourself, ask the right questions, have a meeting here or there, and be able to end up absorbing information, learning, and then taking that information and going out into networking and into the marketplace to end up leveraging that experience and that knowledge that you've gained into other relationships, into other potential investments, into broker relations like we're doing now, or with education platforms like with what we're doing now. So that's sort of my thoughts on our passive investments.
Daisy, what about you? What do you feel? And are you happy you guys did it?
I am. For me, I have to say, I was not interested in real estate at all when we started investing passively, right? It was a strategy for an investment strategy. It wasn't something that I was interested in doing full time. Because the difference is that when you're a limited partner, a passive investor, you are passive, right? So you do all of your homework, at least we did all of our homework up front. vetting the deal, vetting the sponsors, vetting the location. And once we wired the money, then we just kind of sat back and, waited for those distributions to come in every quarter. And so for me, once I saw the distributions coming in every quarter and I got a taste of that cash flow, that's when that combined with seeing within real estate the opportunity to be able to help my family, to retire my parents, to do more for my community, that's what really sold it to me in terms of real estate. It wasn't, doing the spreadsheets and underwriting and like all of those nitty gritty things. It was the bigger picture of seeing the opportunity. And that really started because we were investing passively and I was seeing the power of the cash flow. So for me, it was definitely the right step in terms of starting the journey and seeing the power within real estate to then be able to now, 4 years later, take that next step of transitioning full time into real estate.
Yeah, there's so much you guys said there that was awesome. So for me, I've never invested passively in a deal. We own 10 rentals now to my wife and I, and we've self-managed all but one of them. And it's kind of been this love-hate, some days it's amazing. The cash flow is great. And some days, this literally happened where a water line broke under one of our rentals and filled the basement with water. It was like, there's ups and downs to both. But bringing it back to what you guys said was you learn from it and you take that. And then the other thing is you see the scalability. And that's why I personally love the syndication model is, we can scale now. But what's cool also, the other thing you mentioned was if you're a passive investor or a limited partner in a deal, you don't have to do much. I mean, you guys did it right. You want to do your homework, vet the deal, vet the sponsors, but then you kind of sit back and collect that quarterly check, assuming they're doing a good job. Hopefully you're collecting a check.
Right.
But then it's a really cool way to learn. So that's awesome that you guys have that experience before you could jump to the GP side and move forward. So Daisy, do you miss the teaching? I mean, do you miss kind of that previous life, or because you mentioned you weren't really interested in real estate, but now has that interest grown? Are you glad that you made that change?
Yeah, it's definitely been, it was bittersweet, right? Because I had been in the space for so long and I'd built these relationships with my students, some of my students became my friends. And when I started in the industry, I was pretty young. I was fresh out of college. And so the age was very similar to a lot of the students that I was working with. And there were really strong relationships that I still have to this day. And even in terms of the professional side, right, I had really strong, I realized recently, all female mentors within the space. And coming into real estate, it's different because there's not as many women. And so I came to this realization very recent to where women have been a very big catalyst for me to move into the next phase of my career. And now it's a little bit different where it's been more men and I'm actively seeking out women, but there's not as many women. So that has really given me a really strong interest and passion, I would say, in finding more women that are doing the kind of work that I want to do, and specifically to find Latinas that are doing the kind of work that I want to do. So it's definitely very exciting. I miss the people and I miss the relationships and I miss the camaraderie, but I was definitely ready for something bigger in terms of a challenge, right? I've been in the space for quite some time and, as you learn more, you get comfortable, right? And things become easier. So it's been a steeper curve now going into multifamily, but that's really been my driver as well, because there's so much to learn that there's never a dull day. There's never a day that's the same. One day I'm going to be out in San Antonio touring some properties, and the next day I'm doing, the magic location online to figure out neighborhoods. And the day after that, we're looking at underwriting together, and then we're doing interviews for the podcast. So I love that aspect of it, that every day is completely different.
Yeah, I'm finding the same. So this is kind of coming back to balance. Is like I thought, I kind of get this set up. We'll get my website set up, and it just felt like one more step, and I can breathe. What I'm realizing, and you guys are probably seeing the same, is there's never really the end of the steps. Multifamily is it's bottomless, right? So you can go and go and go. That I really love, and I don't want to compare or belittle what you said about relationships, but I will say that I've found, and I hope you guys have too, that the multifamily space is so relationship based, and everyone keeps saying it's a team sport, right? But also everyone's willing to share. and there's groups and meetups and all kinds of stuff where you can plug in. So, I hope for your sake that you've found that there and that you can kind of replace that. It won't be the same, of course, but replace it with new relationships moving forward.
Yeah.
Cool. So go ahead.
Definitely. I was just going to highlight, the power of the network and of the community. I mean, we met you, Eric, through Multifamily Masters, through the mastermind, through MFM. And it wasn't very long ago, right? And we've just kind of developed this relationship where, we'll come and ask you questions, you come and ask us questions. So I love that aspect of it, to where it's very community oriented.
Oh, absolutely. And let's be honest, that street's been more one way, me asking you guys questions. So certainly appreciate all your help with everything. And yeah, I feel the exact same way. I mean, we met recently, but you guys have been awesome and helpful with me kind of starting this podcast and all kinds of questions I've asked. So thanks again. So let's jump over to your podcast and kind of your business model. I know you guys are somewhat focused on millennials. Is that correct? Can you kind of give us some background on that?
Yeah, we are. So before we ended up, we knew that we wanted to start a podcast of some sort. I mean, this was, I guess, literally a year ago, because that's when stuff really was getting shut down, was like early to mid-March of 2020. Daisy and I ended up thinking, we both ended up thinking it, right? But then had a discussion like, we need to start a podcast or a thought leadership platform of some sort. And it ended up being a podcast. And specifically, we ended up doing market research. We found that millennials just weren't being spoken to very much, like not specifically spoken to. And so we knew that there was a gap there and wanted to be able to speak to them, especially because we are millennials ourselves. I mean, we're literally right within the middle of the cohort. And so it was really being able to speak to them, and we ended up realizing, okay, well, then we can end up working with those millennials, be able to provide more access and education around multifamily real estate investing for them. And so that way they can end up achieving the goals that they want to have at the end of the day. So that's, as far as the podcast is concerned, that really is who we target, who we go after. It's literally people like us. And our listeners who reach out, a lot of them are literally us. And when I say that, it's that they have similar backgrounds, similar ages, similar, just like basic demographic data. We are our listeners, and our listeners are us.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys take that to your podcast now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So, for the markets, I know you live in Austin, right? Are you guys looking in Austin as well, or just specifically San Antonio, or what are your kind of markets you focus on?
Yeah, we're looking really at that triangle, that Texas triangle. So between Austin, San Antonio, I guess Austin/San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston. But right now, because we are based in Austin, we're really hyper-focused on the 35 corridor between Austin and San Antonio, because as probably a lot of you know, right, Tesla has moved into town. There's a lot of big companies that are continuing to move into Austin. And so that is, increasing the housing costs, the housing prices here within the city limits. And so people are now moving out further and further, outside of the city limits. And so there's just a lot of growth. There's a lot of exciting things happening here for sure. And so with that, we're looking to, address the housing issue between Austin and San Antonio to be able to, to provide more housing within that range.
Yeah.
Awesome. So have you had some success? I mean, what's your deal flow looking like? I think, when you talk to people in the multifamily space now, it sounds like the biggest challenge for most people is finding that deal. So kudos to you for moving there. I mean, that's such a huge piece, is to be there, boots on the ground. If someone says there's a deal, you're there next day, whatever it might be. But generally speaking, are you guys having some success finding deals, or are they still pretty tough?
Yeah, there are deals that are coming through to us over at Make It Rain Capital, but yeah, it's a matter of figuring out which one is going to end up fitting our investment criteria and what would end up fitting our investors themselves. We are open to partnerships as well. So we're looking at either lead GPing or co-GPing and really fitting into where the partnership would ultimately make sense. There is a strong amount of deal flow, I would say, but whatever the rule is, underwrite 100 to be able to get one under contract and actually close on it. That's probably like a solid ratio to end up going off of. It's a law of averages, of course, but yeah, that really is what's going on right now. Cap rates are compressing, and we're seeing a lot of that. So broker relations and knowing your market just becomes that more important.
Yeah, and in terms of successes, I would add to what Luke said that a big part is those non-measurables, right? And Luke and I were talking about this very recent, where we are maybe seeing a similar amount of deal flow that maybe we were seeing a couple months ago. The big difference and the big differentiator is that now I'm able to get in my car and drive an hour and a half and be in San Antonio and meet that broker face to face and have those kind of conversations and learn more, from local people about property management, which ones are good to go with, which ones are not. And a lot of that is things that you can't necessarily measure, but we feel the growth in other ways, right? In those relationships that we're building. We are also starting a meetup, an in-person meetup here in Austin. We have our first event next week. This is a Saturday, it's next Wednesday. And so it's just that momentum, right? It's being here, it's hearing from other people like, wow, we see you everywhere now, right? And that being a good thing because we're on social media, we're now in-person events, we're meeting with the brokers. And so it's all of those things that build up to help you close your first deal, which is what we're working towards.
Oh yeah, immeasurables. I mean, you said it so well, and there's so much to that, right? So one market I look at is Tulsa, and I traveled there with a partner of mine. We went and visited the city, and one deal looked really nice on paper, and even the neighborhood looked nice. You get there and you drive around, you even ask people ask the broker, ask people, and you can see, okay, this little pocket within this neighborhood that's supposedly pretty nice is really tough actually. And so that made the underwriting so much different. So it's that type of thing. I completely agree in person that just changes everything. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I'm going to transition, and I have 6 questions that I'll ask you guys. It doesn't have to be like fire round or rapid. It's just kind of 6 that I'm going to ask every guest. So this podcast, I want to focus on the mindset. So some of this is just me taking a guess at what I think people do. But if you could kind of think about the mindset behind the question. So the first one would be, do you guys have a morning routine?
Yes. So I'll end up waking up once I'm actually awake, after 5 or 10 minutes, I'll end up writing my goals. So I write those down every single morning. Some of those, and I've been doing that for, 6 to 7 years, something along those lines. And those goals have kind of evolved and changed. Some of those are financial goals and quantitative, some are qualitative and they're more relational, right? But I end up writing those down. And I'd say that these are long-term goals, stuff that could take years, decades potentially to accomplish.
You don't write down that your goal is to brush your teeth? Check. Got that one.
Yeah, it's like a low hurdle to end up going over.
No, I've heard about people doing that. It's awesome. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay, no, you're good. You're good. So I'll end up doing those, Eric, and then I read the Daily Stoic as well. There's a Stoic entry every single day. I guess Stoicism is really about decreasing suffering in life. At the end of the day, I'd say that's the thesis of the philosophy. I have a workbook for Think and Grow Rich. I end up going through that as well. And I meditate, and then I make my coffee, and then I start working here. So yeah, that's really my morning routine.
Awesome.
And for me, I usually wake up not as early as Luke, I have to add, but I'll wake up. I also do some form of meditation in the morning. I used to actually meditate, and more recently it's actually turned more into doing a movement practice. So I'll put in music, I'll put some relaxing, create a relaxing ambiance and do a little bit of yoga, like movement in the morning. I'll write down my goals as well, and then do an entry into the Stoic journal. I also, as part of my morning routine, I write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. And that really helps to ground me for sure, just to get the day started off with a very positive mindset. And I have to add that, not every day do I get to all of those things, right? To be completely honest, but the days that I don't, I definitely feel the difference. So it helps me to stay on track, right? And make sure that I'm doing those things to be the best version of myself in the morning. And then I'll have my vitamins, which Luke always puts out my vitamins and some liver in the morning. He'll put that out for me. And so as I'm making my coffee in the morning, then I'll have those and then get my morning started from there.
Nice, Luke. Good touch.
Yeah. Well, I know if I don't do it, she won't get to them. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And then, we support each other, right? That's the point of being in a relationship.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I was going to ask about liver, but I'm just going to breeze on past that. Well, I'll let the listeners dive into that themselves. Yeah. They can Google that. Okay, cool. The next one is, what books are you guys reading, or what books do you recommend?
So the only book that I'm reading right now, there's a book that, his name is Robert Beardsley, I believe. He's out of New York, part of Lone Star Capital, and he wrote a book on underwriting. Super strong. Like it gets very technical, but for anyone who has a cursory knowledge or a foundational knowledge of underwriting and who wants to become much more of an expert, I would say it's a good way to end up going about doing it. He has his own underwriting model as well that's available on his website. That's a very solid underwriting model, in my opinion, as well. He's a great resource. Yeah, that's the only book that I'm reading right now. In terms of any book that I would end up recommending, I would recommend a book by Napoleon Hill that recently came out. Maybe it was a decade ago, so it wasn't one of the earlier ones. It's called Outwitting the Devil, and it's a book literally about mindset. That's literally what it boils down to. And it's why people succeed versus not in life and achieving their goals.
Wow. I haven't read that one, but that's the podcast, right? So definitely add that to my list. And then Daisy, before I move on, Luke, I actually watched a webinar and I have a recording with Rob, and he dives into his model a little bit. It's amazing. That guy is an underwriting master, and his model is for free. Just so everyone knows, it's out there on his website. Unbelievable book, super technical. I agree, but his model is really cool too. And there's so many things about his model that I really like. Not that many people out there, at least what I'm seeing, are using it yet, but great recommendation. So what about you, Daisy?
Yeah, for me right now, it's Traction. It's a book that was recommended by someone that we know and that we respect quite a bit. And it's really given us a very deep understanding of what the goal is going forward. So it really focuses on creating a business strategy. We're in March right now. Luke and I sat down end of the year, December, January, and really wrote out our business strategy for Make It Rain Capital. That's not something that we've done before. We were kind of figuring things out as we went, but really defining our goals for, the next quarter, year, 3 years, 10 years out has really now defined how we spend our time and what are those things that we spend our time working on. Because we can, be busy and work towards something, but it doesn't mean it's going to get you closer to where you want to be. So that's been huge. We're still, we have the business strategy, but we're still diving into the book, and there's a lot to it for sure. So that's one that I would recommend on our end. That's been made a really big difference in terms of our business strategy. And on a personal level, I would recommend The Power of Now. It's much more introspective in terms of being present, understanding who you are, your thoughts, more on the spiritual side, potentially, I would say, but really good about living a well-defined life that is intentional versus living day to day, just reactive to the world.
This is awesome. I had a meeting with my coach on Wednesday, and he emailed me that book specifically. He said, this is the second time I heard that this week, but yeah, now I have a long reading list. So apparently my mornings are jammed for the next couple of weeks. Cool. So I guess it kind of leads me into my next question is, have you guys had a coach or a mentor, or do you now? And if so, do you feel like it was worth the investment?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think. The closest thing really is the MFM Mastermind as a formal coach, I would say. Because that is it is a coaching program of sorts, and we do have a mentor within the group that we're able to go to with specific questions. In terms of more around mindset and life, Eric, I mean, I'd say my mentors have been, some people I've met, some people I haven't, but it's been Robert F. Smith, Grant Cardone, Malcolm X, Marcus Aurelius, Napoleon Hill. It's been those guys, right, who I've been able to look at and look, okay, what have they done? What are the moves that they've made, and work to end up imitating them.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, that's such a cool answer. Daisy, I know you mentioned you had mentors, kind of in the education space. Do you feel like you have that now?
I do. I feel like within the mastermind that we're part of and the different organizations, there have been people that have stood out for me personally. Within MFM, there's a couple people that I know I can go to, and they'll help answer questions and be there. And I know that they're on our side, right? They're cheerleading for us. They're really like excited to see what's coming up next in terms of what we're up to and what our goals are. And I would say on more so a personal professional level, I am part of this organization called Real, focused on Latinos within the commercial real estate space. And there's been the founder there and another board member, both women, actually, now that I think about it, have also really taken a very active role in helping to, help clarify different things for me and just direct us in terms of our business strategy as well. So I would say that they are definitely huge mentors and have shifted even what we're starting to focus on. Luke and I had certain ideas around what our goals were within the multifamily space. And one of them that we're working with now pretty closely, she's been in private equity and raised millions of dollars for other firms. And so we're talking to her, we're in very, consistent conversations, and it's starting to change our outlook and what we want to do now going forward. So very, very powerful to be involved and be under somebody who's done something almost unimaginable for us.
Yeah, I think that's sometimes what I love about having a mentor, having, like I'm part of the mastermind as well too. And you can see people there that have done what you want to do, or maybe more than you believe even possible.
Yeah.
But that you can, because they said, well, I was in your position, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it might be. Completely agree. It's so powerful to talk to someone and say, look, I'm not sure how to get there. And I say, well, let me help you along the way. And then the other thing you mentioned was cheerleaders. I mean, I love this space because it seems like everyone really is cheering everyone on. There's not like this kind of undercutting. I don't know how to say it, but it seems like everyone's sort of positive and pushing forward. So I love that as well. So awesome. Okay. The next one's a little tougher. What is the biggest mistake that you've made in your, we'll just say, investing career?
Biggest mistake.
Or maybe any career. What's something we can learn from that if you look back and you said, yeah, I wouldn't do that again.
I would say I wouldn't call it a mistake. I would say a learning opportunity for me is just to get over the fear and start sooner, right? I had a really bad experience when I was young where I had a stalker. And so when Luke and I first started the podcast, it was really hard for me to be public, right? So to say, and put out content about ourselves and about me specifically, and make my Instagram and, my social media not private and not only associate with people that I knew in person, because I had this traumatic experience when I was younger. And so I wish that I would have been able to process that sooner, because it was holding me back in different ways. And so it was more so now, now that I've gone through that process, and maybe this is a little bit deeper than, you.
No, dive in. This is awesome. Yeah.
But now it's really, what are those other fears that are holding me back, and how can I process them? So then, in 5, 10, 20 years, I'm not looking back thinking, oh, I should have processed that as well. So it's just that introspection of seeing what are those things that are holding me back, and Daisy, put yourself to work and start working through those.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And for me, I would say it's, everything happens at a certain time, or it can be the right timing. But I would say one of the bigger mistakes was not starting the podcast sooner. For us, the podcast, like we ended up mentioning to you before, Eric, that kind of was the catalyst for everything that we're doing now. We were already planning to move to Texas, but the podcast and being able to have quality guests on, connect with listeners, be able to learn more, be able to network has really propelled where we're going and ended up making things move quicker than we really knew they could or understood that they could, or we didn't really know what to do. It's like, it's like you're riding a bike and then the bike starts going faster than you know how to handle it almost.
Yeah.
Then you have to, it's like, okay, either you slow down or you end up learning how to ride it very, very quickly, right? So I'd say that was a bigger mistake, and that's more from an opportunity cost perspective, not from something that's like tangible, like, oh, we put in 50 grand and like it was horrible sponsors. Like we don't have any like horror stories like that necessarily. But knock on wood, yeah. But yeah, I'd say that's what it was. And I mean, it really was a mindset thing at the time. We individually and collectively just weren't ready 3 years ago to start the podcast. It would have been great if we did, but the bright side and the other way of looking at it from at least the Stoic perspective is, well, we started it a year ago, and as opposed to starting it like right now and look at where we are, you know what I mean? Or starting it 5 years from now. And it's like, well, what sort of opportunity costs could there have been? So it's cool to see that you're getting out there, that you're learning also, and you're putting yourself outside of your comfort zone and doing it too, and jumping in.
Oh yeah, no. I completely agree with what you're saying. So Daisy, first off, thanks for being vulnerable and thanks for sharing. I did like what you said is it's a learning opportunity rather than a mistake, right? And I tend to be an overly positive person too. It's basically like you either win or you learn. And, that's kind of usually my mindset. And so maybe I should even change that to not say mistake, but what's like something you would have done differently maybe, to phrase that with future guests. Cause I don't really want to even say mistake. You're right. It's not a mistake that you didn't, and good job for you guys. I mean, you have a year's worth of podcasts and tons of awesome content out there. And obviously it's propelled you to somewhere better. So you took it and ran with it, and it's not even a mistake. It's something that you learn from. So thanks for sharing. So the next one would be so this one's kind of a tricky question, but what mindset tips can you give someone who's starting out? So someone who might be wanting to, it doesn't have to be multifamily necessarily, but wanting to jump to something. What tips can you guys give to someone new?
That's a really good question, Eric. I would say do something that scares you or puts you out of your comfort zone every day. When Luke and I started the podcast, and I was genuinely scared because there was a fear for my life, right, associated with being a public figure, I would take cold showers every day. And that, put me in a state where I felt like I was in control versus the world being in control of me. And even though it sounds like it's something very, very small, very minimal, it made a huge impact internally, right, for me in terms of feeling that I was taking action and not being a victim to the world. And so it was just every day doing something uncomfortable or that was different. With the podcast, that was huge. With moving here, that was really big. And then those changes have just escalated, right? And they've transformed depending on the phase of life that I'm in. But it's continuing to put yourself out of your comfort zone. If you've never gone to a meetup, go to the first one. I was really nervous and scared when I went to my first one. I kept thinking, like, who am I to be here? Like, I don't know anything about multifamily. I don't know anything about real estate. And I just kept doing it. And the more I did it, the easier it got.
Yeah. So that way I understand. Can you repeat the question again? I got wrapped up in what Daisy was talking about.
No, and thanks, Daisy. That was amazing. I mean, again, the question is basically what mindset tips can you give someone new? I mean, I guess we'll focus on multifamily, but like if someone's starting out and they say, well, how can I change my mindset? Because I think a lot of people have something similar. It's like, well, I don't know anything about real estate, or I don't know anything about multifamily. What tip can you give to someone new to help them kind of get propelled?
So I'll give advice for what I've done. I'd say write goals down and make them big and audacious goals and things that you may not even think are possible right now. And then hopefully in a matter of a few years, then you'll look back and say, I should have been thinking bigger, right? Because you write those down each and every day, like you're seeing that constantly, that does get into your mind, it gets into your brain and your subconscious. And that starts to become your reality, right? It's just a matter of time catching up to where your actual reality is, I would say. So that's I'd say that's a big one. And the other part too is see what other successful people have done and see yourself in their shoes from at least a mindset perspective. Everybody's born with different abilities, different innate gifts, all of that sort of stuff. But we all have the ability to end up being more and doing more and realizing that I think it's very powerful to think about, like, even here, even if your family came from a different country, right? Well, then in the last generation or two, odds are you're in a much better position than they were. Even if your family has been here for 4 generations, 10 generations, you're probably in a better position than your grandparents or your great grandparents were. I mean, 100 years ago, the majority of people in the U.S. Were farmers and they were living in poverty. It's like, that's just not what we have now. And so I guess what I'm driving at is that there's a strong lineage and ancestry of strong people. And all of us, I feel like, are strong people inherently. And we wouldn't be here if we weren't, because our ancestors were strong to be able to survive. The people who weren't strong, they didn't have descendants. But you're a descendant, Eric. I am. Daisy is. The listeners are. So realizing that strength is within you and being able to look at what other people are doing, right, to where you want to be, and putting yourself in their shoes and realizing, hey, I'm strong. This is who I am. I can end up doing those things too.
Wow, that was awesome. I'm not even going to say anything because that was amazing. Thank you, guys. Okay, the next question would be, if someone asked you what makes you successful, what would you say? So that can be, kind of taken 2 different ways. So I know success has different ways of being described. And so that's part of the question too is, one is, if someone says, why are you guys successful? What's your answer? And then the second is, what is success in your mind?
Yeah. Do you want to go, or I can?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So I would say the way that I am defining it is it's doing what you say that you're going to do. Right. And it's sort of, and I've heard it said before by other people, one being Ed Milet, like keeping those promises that you make to yourself. I think that's a strong way to have a benchmark for success, not just day by day, but hour by hour and minute by minute. And because it's very easy to not keep the promises that you make to yourself. And so keeping those is huge. And then from a more traditional perspective, if you will, about defining success, I think for me, it's those goals that I have. And am I living up to those goals? Am I living up to my potential? And am I living up to and accomplishing the goals that I have in light of and because of all the sacrifices that my parents have made, that my grandparents have made, and where they're from? Some of my grandparents were from Europe, and they left because of world wars. And I have other grandparents who were in the Caribbean, and they grew up in abject poverty, right? And so, am I living up to the sacrifices that they made? Am I really taking advantage of all the opportunities that are available to me that just weren't there for anyone in my family beforehand? I mean, I'm not to get to what is it? I guess this is a mindset podcast, so it's fine. But
go for it.
But I mean, there's different issues here in America. Nobody's house is completely clean and pristine, right? At the same time, I feel that there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. I'd speak personally for myself, the fact that I was born here and that I have a college degree, like I'm in the top 1% of people in the world, probably, if you look at it from that perspective. And there's opportunities here. The fact that we're talking about multifamily and investing in it, I mean, there's probably 1 billion to 2 billion people in the rest of the world who would consider it a godsend if they changed places with any of the 3 of us. So that just gives me perspective day in and day out around that mindset of like, let's do it. I mean, this isn't, we have one life. I probably have 60 or 80 years left, knock on wood, whatever it is. And so being able to take advantage of those opportunities that have been afforded to me. And I've done, it's just like, it was just by chance that I was just born here and I have these certain opportunities. So, long answer to a short question, but
no, that's awesome. Thank you. I have a friend who's a teacher, and he says this all the time. He says it to his students all the time. He says, being born here in the United States, you got the jackpot, right? And it doesn't mean that it's any better or worse than anywhere else, but it means that potentially you're given opportunities that lots of other people aren't. So don't squander that. Don't not realize that is by chance an amazing opportunity that you're given. So take advantage, and do the best, exactly like you said. And the other thing I want to say is, these things, it's not like money, for example. This is my perspective, is it's not just something that if you take someone else gets less. It's kind of this unending resource. So if you have the ability to take advantage of where you are, you can create more. Wealth can be created. So it doesn't mean that you're being greedy, doesn't mean that you're being selfish. You're taking advantage of something that was given to you that you were, for lack of a better term, lucky to have. So that's such a cool mindset and a great answer. So what about you, Daisy?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to, to what Luke said, that's the mindset piece is something that we talk about a lot, and that is very present in our relationship, as husband and wife, and our partnership, being business partners, and in, the future parents, right, that we want to be to our kids. So I love this question. Thank you for asking and for providing a platform for it, Eric. For me, success really is about living up to who I am meant to be and being me in the process. And the reason I say that is because initially I felt that my over positivity or enthusiasm or excitement, right? Always looking at things from a positive perspective, didn't quite fit into the multifamily space because it's very business driven. It can be, right? Depending on who you're doing business with. It's more male centric and it's not as open as I thought it might be, right? And the more I've been in the space, I've realized that it's really a mindset piece. I was limiting myself by background, being Mexican American, being a woman, all of these things that I held very strong identities to were actually limiting me and my potential and what I thought I could achieve. And so going back to your question about success, it's really, for me, been about success is being self-aware of who I am and being able to leverage that to do good in the world, to create more access for my community, to be able to retire my parents, to be able to provide opportunity for people that wouldn't otherwise be able to be able to foster positive relationships with like-minded people. Who are around me, to be able to be the best wife and mother and daughter and sister and all of these different roles that are really important to me. And at the end of the day, to live a life that's intentional, right? To where when I'm 60, 70, 80, 90, depending on what age I get to, that I can look back at my life and say, I have all of these memories and all of these relationships that have made my life worth it. Because at the end of the day, money is a means to an end. And for me, the end is really to make an impact on other people. And so if I look back and I'm a multi-billionaire, but I didn't help anybody, I didn't give back to my community, I didn't, create positive change in the world, then was it worth it? And for me, it wouldn't have been. So it's not waiting until I'm in a financial position to do more, but doing more where I am today and continuing that practice every day going forward.
Yeah, there's so much in there that was so cool that you just said. One, I completely agree that money is not the answer, right? I mean, you can make more, but what is it that you're doing with the money? And what's the goal with the money, right? So, I think if everyone's honest, most people want to have more of it. But what are you going to do with it? And you can amass a huge wealth, but if you're not helping anyone, if you're not using it for something positive, I imagine it would be fairly empty. So I completely agree with you. And the other thing, Daisy, that it's really cool that you're not losing your identity, you're not ditching your identity, but you're also not using it as a crutch. You say, okay, yeah, I'm Mexican American, I'm a woman, and maybe that's rare in the space I'm in, but you can use it, and you can also bring people up with you. It's so cool. So thank you for sharing so much. So the last thing would be, where can people find you? Where can they learn more about you? This has been incredible. So before I really kind of let go, I just want to say thank you both again for everything you shared. This has been really awesome. But yeah, if you can let people know where they can find you.
Well, thanks. Thanks to you, Eric. I know that you ended up reaching out to us about being a guest on your podcast. So we appreciate you providing the platform for us and being able to end up speaking our truth really here. So in terms of reaching out to us, though, if you Google Make It Rain Capital, you'll find us. We are on Instagram. We're on Facebook. I don't know when this is premiering, but we're going to be on YouTube soon. Both of us are on LinkedIn. But if you go to makeitraincapital.com, you can end up learning more about us. You can see what sorts of assets we invest in. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can schedule a call with us. When I say schedule a call with us, we actually do talk to people. We do that all the time. Like I said, like our listeners are us and we're our listeners. So yeah, we're pretty much everywhere, and I'd say we're pretty accessible. So just reach out, and the best way to do that is going straight to the website, of course, and you'll be able to find links to everything else there. So makeitraincapital.com.
Awesome.
Yeah, I just want to add really quick, Eric, that it's been amazing seeing, you go from having the thought of having a podcast to now going through execution, and you being on the interviewing side and having us on. So I just want to applaud you and say kudos to you, because you put yourself in an uncomfortable place, something that was different, and you're starting on this journey that I hope it's going to be amazing and fruitful and filled with abundance for you. And so we're just excited to be a very small part of that process, and to see you grow and to see where you're going to be in a year and 2 years and 3 years from now.
Well, thank you guys so much. Yeah, I can't say thanks again. This was a great episode. I know listeners are going to love it. And I appreciate being vulnerable, because you can tell you're both being very honest and open, and that's awesome. So thanks for saying that. Yeah, it's a little uncomfortable to get started. Hopefully, just get better and better and better at it. Cool. Well, I'll say one more time, makeitraincapital.com. Is that right?
Yes.
Cool. Head over there and connect with Daisy and Luke. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Real Estate Mindset Podcast. If you've enjoyed the content today, please follow this show wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to head over to wildoakcapital.com for more information or to connect with Eric directly. Please take a moment to leave a review or tell a friend about what you've listened to today. We hope you'll tune in again soon.